Render unto Caesar, Bitcoin's reinterpretation as humanity's store of value. Introduction. The gift misunderstood. History is filled with gifts humanity failed to recognize when they first appeared. Fire was feared before it was harnessed. The printing press was condemned before it educated. Electricity was dismissed as a parlor trick. Every great leap forward begins as a misunderstood offering, a technology whose true purpose only becomes visible when the world grows into the need it was built to fill. Bitcoin follows this same archetype. When Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper in 2008, the intent seemed clear: to create a decentralized, peer-to-peer cash system, a network for direct exchange without intermediaries. It was framed as a tool for payments, a new way to move value online without banks or gatekeepers. But over time, the world reinterpreted the gift. The real problem wasn't how to send money, it was how to keep it. Governments inflated, banks overlevered, and central planners redefined scarcity itself. Amid this erosion of trust, Bitcoin's fixed supply and incorruptible code began to shine as something more profound: a store of value. What was once intended for daily commerce evolved into a sanctuary for savings, a kind of digital gold that couldn't be confiscated, diluted, or debased. Bitcoin didn't fail its original mission. It outgrew it. It became what humanity actually needed, not what it initially asked for: a foundation for financial sovereignty in an age of systemic decay. Section 2, the original design, peer-to-peer cash, and the vision of decentralization. When Satoshi Nakamoto released Bitcoin in 2008, the timing was deliberate. The world was in the depths of the global financial crisis. Trust in banks and governments had collapsed, and headlines about bailouts and insolvency filled the air. Hidden within Bitcoin's first block, the Genesis block, was a message. The Times, 3rd of January 2009. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. It was more than a timestamp. It was a declaration of intent. Bitcoin was conceived as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, money without middlemen, censorship, or counterparty risk. It was the digital heir to hard money, blending cryptography, open-source governance, and a fixed monetary policy. Every participant could verify supply, validate transactions, and hold their wealth directly, free from the permissions of institutions. In its earliest years, the network embodied that dream. Users traded Bitcoin for pizzas, domain names, and small services, modest exchanges that proved the system worked. The Bitcoin as cash vision seemed alive and well, yet as the network grew, cracks emerged. Transactions slowed, fees rose. The blockchain, designed to prioritize security over speed, revealed its limitations as a global payments rail. At the same time, people began noticing something unexpected. The price of Bitcoin, while volatile, kept rising. Its value didn't come from how fast it moved, but from how scarce and uncompromising it was. The revelation was quiet but revolutionary. Perhaps Bitcoin's greatest feature wasn't utility, it was integrity. And integrity, unlike speed, compounds over time. What began as an experiment in payments was becoming something far more durable, the purest form of digital property the world had ever seen. 3. The world's response, from utility to sanctuary. The market, not the manifesto, ultimately decided Bitcoin's fate. As adoption grew, so did friction. Scalability debates erupted, and the community split over how to handle the network's limits. The question was philosophical as much as technical. Should Bitcoin prioritize speed and scale, or security and scarcity? The so-called block size wars of the mid-2010s exposed a deeper truth about money itself. One camp saw Bitcoin as digital cash, a replacement for credit cards and remittance rails. The other saw it as digital gold, a base layer of trust that should remain slow, secure, and uncompromising. Markets voted with their capital. Users who once traded Bitcoin for coffee began to hold it instead. The HODL meme wasn't just culture, it was economics in motion. People realized that spending Bitcoin was irrational when it appreciated faster than the goods it could buy. What began as a tool for payments became a vault for value. The result was a silent pivot. Bitcoin's identity shifted from medium of exchange to store of value, not by decree, but by discovery. In a world drowning in cheap credit and debt monetization, Bitcoin's fixed supply offered something radical, an asset that couldn't be printed or promised away. As trust in governments and central banks eroded, Individuals and institutions began treating Bitcoin not as a novelty, but as insurance, a hedge against monetary entropy. It became a sanctuary, not because of what it let you buy, but because of what it refused to let anyone take. Section 4. The Reinterpretation. Store of value as a civilizational upgrade. Every civilization rises on the back of a stable store of value, something that allows human effort to persist through time. Gold, land, and other hard assets once fulfilled that role. But all of them leak. Gold can be seized or inflated by discovery. Land can be taxed, confiscated, or rendered worthless by conflict. Even cash, once thought reliable, decays quietly through inflation and policy. Bitcoin changed that equation. It introduced a new kind of asset, one that does not leak. A fixed supply, 21 million units, no more, no less, enforces an unbreakable scarcity. Each coin is a defined fraction of the entire network's value, immutable and verifiable by anyone. Ownership isn't granted by law or trusted custodians, but by private keys, cryptographic proof that replaces permission with possession. This design produces an extraordinary thought experiment, the reincarnation test. If you held Bitcoin today, died, and returned a century later, your share of the total network would remain intact. No government, corporation, or crisis could have quietly diluted it. What you own is a permanent proportion of the system itself, a time capsule of value. That permanence is revolutionary. For the first time in human history, wealth can exist entirely beyond coercion or decay. No bail-ins, no devaluation, no counterparty failure. Bitcoin reframes money as a long-term coordination mechanism rather than a short-term medium of exchange. It becomes civilization's anchor, not its lubricant, a base layer for honest accounting in an age of systemic distortion. In this sense, Bitcoin is not just financial innovation, it is civilizational repair. A hard reset on what value means, who controls it, and how time itself can be preserved through code. Section 5. Render unto Caesar. Dual realms of money. In one of history's most quoted parables, Jesus holds up a Roman coin and says, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's." It was a masterstroke of clarity, a recognition that not all value belongs to the same realm. The same duality now defines our modern monetary order. Fiat currencies, dollars, euros, yen, are instruments of the state. They operate in Caesar's domain, taxation, regulation, and commerce. They grease the machinery of the modern world, ensuring contracts can be settled and governments can fund their ambitions. Fiat is for obligation, for what must flow. Bitcoin, by contrast, belongs to the other realm, the realm of sovereignty and time. It does not compete with fiat in the arena of transactions. It transcends it in the domain of preservation. Where fiat circulates, Bitcoin anchors. Where fiat is enforced, Bitcoin is chosen. This separation mirrors the unbundling of money's ancient triad. Medium of exchange corresponds to fiat and stablecoins. Unit of account remains largely fiat-dominated. Store of value is gradually migrating to Bitcoin and hard assets. Rather than overthrowing the existing system, Bitcoin coexists as its silent counterbalance, an incorruptible ledger beside a mutable one. It restores symmetry. Citizens render their taxes in Caesar's currency, but store their life's work in a parallel form of truth. This bifurcation, state money for function, cryptographic money for freedom, signals a profound evolution. Humanity is not rejecting money. It is refining it, dividing its purposes so that each can do what it does best. In the end, Bitcoin doesn't destroy Caesar. It simply ensures Caesar cannot destroy you. This content is brought to you by Bobby Giggs. Promote your brand here and reach a wide audience across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Follow the links in the description to get started. Section 6. The broader pattern. Rejected stones, reinterpreted gifts. Throughout history, the most transformative ideas arrive disguised as irrelevance. They're mocked, minimized, or misunderstood precisely because they break from the familiar. Every age has its rejected stone, something dismissed by the establishment only to become the cornerstone of the next world. When Galileo pointed his telescope toward the heavens, the church resisted not because the data was flawed, but because it threatened the narrative. When the early internet emerged, traditional media ignored it, unable to imagine a world where distribution was free. When electricity was introduced, it was viewed as a curiosity rather than a civilization-altering force. Bitcoin stands squarely in that lineage. At first, it was a toy for cryptographers and libertarians, dismissed by economists, feared by politicians, and ridiculed by bankers. But like all misunderstood gifts, it carried an embedded truth that only became visible over time. Each crisis, financial, political, or institutional, revealed another layer of its purpose. The same dynamic underpins every act of reinterpretation. A misfit invention meets an unmet need. Resistance gives way to recognition. Utility transforms into revelation. In that light, Bitcoin isn't merely an asset class, it's a moral technology. It encodes fairness through mathematics and accountability through transparency. Its gift is not wealth itself, but a new standard for truth and value exchange. The world didn't ask for a savior from inflation, it asked for better money. What it received was incorruptible money, and that turned out to be salvation enough. Section 7, the present need. Why the world chose store of value over speed. The world didn't pivot to Bitcoin's store of value narrative by accident. It was driven there by necessity. Every major economy is now entangled in a debt supercycle. Governments borrow to survive, central banks print to sustain, and citizens quietly lose purchasing power in the process. Inflation is no longer an event, it's a policy. For decades, the illusion of stability was maintained through financial engineering, quantitative easing, artificially low interest rates, and the comforting belief that productivity would always grow faster than debt. In truth, the opposite became reality. Debt outpaced productivity, and the system now suffocates under the weight of its own promises. The traditional safe havens, bonds, cash, even property, now leak under the pressure of negative real yields and political risk. In that void, Bitcoin found its purpose. It wasn't faster than Visa or cheaper than PayPal, but it was truer. It did one thing the global financial system no longer could: preserve purchasing power over time. Institutions began to see it first. MicroStrategy converted cash reserves into Bitcoin, calling it a superior treasury asset. Publicly traded, exchange-traded funds followed. Even sovereign wealth funds began to whisper its name. Not because they were radical, but because they were rational. The world no longer needed faster money, it needed harder money. And Bitcoin, with its auditable supply and unforgeable ledger, met that need perfectly. Its ascent is less a rebellion than a reckoning, a collective acknowledgement that the current system cannot be trusted to keep its promises. Where central banks manage confidence through speech, Bitcoin manages it through math. The shift is cultural as much as financial. Humanity is rediscovering the value of saving, not spending, of sovereignty, not subservience. The network may be digital, but the impulse behind it is ancient, to preserve the fruits of one's labor against the erosion of time and power. Bitcoin became the world's store of value because the world ran out of trustworthy alternatives. Section 8, the philosophical core: ownership, time, and truth. At its deepest level, Bitcoin is not about money, it's about time. Every Satoshi represents a unit of human energy stored incorruptibly across generations. It is proof that effort once spent need not vanish with the decay of institutions or the deceit of policy. In this sense, Bitcoin transforms economics into metaphysics. It converts labor into a durable form of truth. Ownership under fiat systems is conditional. Your savings depend on banks remaining solvent, your property on laws remaining fair, your purchasing power on governments exercising restraint. Every layer of traditional finance demands trust, and every layer leaks. Bitcoin eliminates that dependence. With private keys, the individual becomes their own central bank. Custody is direct, not deferred. There are no gatekeepers, no permissions, no intermediaries who can redefine your balance or revoke your access. What's yours is verifiably, mathematically, and permanently yours. This represents a profound philosophical inversion. Fiat money externalizes control. It is ownership by decree. Bitcoin internalizes it, ownership by proof. In doing so, it collapses the distinction between property and principle. To hold Bitcoin is to participate in a system where truth is measurable and trust is optional. That's why the network evokes more than financial loyalty. It inspires conviction. It satisfies an ancient human longing for permanence in a transient world, for certainty in the face of entropy. In a century defined by digital abundance and informational noise, Bitcoin offers the rarest of assets: verifiable scarcity. It doesn't promise wealth, it promises fairness. It doesn't guarantee profit, it guarantees integrity. And for a civilization choking on manipulation, that may be the most valuable guarantee of all. Section 9. Conclusion. The uncheatable share. Every era produces one instrument that redefines trust. For millennia, that instrument was gold, a physical anchor that disciplined empires and restrained excess. In our digital age, that role has passed to Bitcoin. It is the first asset that cannot be forged, inflated, or seized through decree. It turns mathematics into sovereignty and scarcity into freedom. Bitcoin didn't fail to become digital cash. It succeeded in becoming digital truth. The world didn't misuse it. It reinterpreted it. When Satoshi gave humanity a tool for peer-to-peer exchange, he may not have realized he was also handing it a mirror, a way for society to see what it valued most. And what it valued above all was permanence. The phrase "render unto Caesar" captures this new duality perfectly. Caesar still governs the realm of transaction: fiat, taxes, obligations, commerce. But beyond Caesar's reach now exists a parallel realm, the cryptographic domain of incorruptible value. Here, what's earned cannot be diluted, and what's owned cannot be taken. Bitcoin's promise is not that it will make everyone rich, but that it will make wealth honest. It reintroduces the concept of the uncheatable share, your slice of a finite whole, immune to manipulation or decay. In a world where every promise leaks and every ledger bends, Bitcoin stands as civilization's most audacious experiment, a system of value beyond permission, beyond politics, and perhaps beyond time itself. It is the store of value humanity didn't know it was waiting for, a foundation not for faster money, but for truer money. A gift, finally understood.